Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for this session on emotional intelligence in career development, the role that it plays in career development. My name's Jodi Hammer, and I will be your host for today, leading you through this discussion. And I look forward to taking your questions and having you share insight and knowledge that you might have about emotional intelligence as well. So very happy to be with you here today, and let's go ahead and get started. So first, I want to define emotional intelligence, and I want to actually start this by asking you all, how would you define emotional intelligence? And you can just write that in the chat box. I have it pulled up here too, so if you're watching this live, that is. What do you think of when you think of emotional intelligence? And that's what we're going to talk about. So I don't see anything coming in yet, but being able to read the room well. Cindy and Rebecca, excellent. That's very important, right? Emotional intelligence. When you have a higher level of emotional intelligence, you can read the other people in the room, right? Their emotions, how they're feeling, how they're reacting, and you can empathize. There's other things that go with it as well. So excellent. Good. Tact, says Angelique. Absolutely. Emotional intelligence, knowing how to be, real and true in emotions and such, but in a tactful, in a very professional way, so that professional and yet really personal, right? So that people trust you, and yeah, it's clear that you care, and that is really important. Absolutely. Logical versus emotional. Yes, and I think that's an interesting one when you're saying it like, if you're comparing your IQ, your intelligent quotient, right, versus your emotional intelligence, I would say definitely the intelligence is more of that what you know, and maybe that the logistical aspect and such, and the emotional is more tapping into your own emotions and knowing how to control those and keep those in check, to not react defensively, things like that, but also to be able to read others and be able to help foster that kind of an environment where you're able to, everyone's able to do that. So great. Simona is sharing that I feel it always starts with self. When we know ourselves, we can discern what's ours versus what's someone else's, so that we can navigate the human experience. Absolutely. That is spot on. Navigate it smoothly, or more smoothly. We all know there are ups and downs, right? But, navigating human beings, humans, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I really like that. That's great. Great insight. So let's go ahead, and go on to the next slide here, where I do have a couple definitions. There are many ways to define emotional intelligence, and the concept yet is very, clear, right? There's some shared characteristics in definitions, and some of the models, like you'll see the different models that are out there. Some will have 4 components, or some will have 5, and so it can be confusing, but there's a couple of ways that I liked here of defining it that I found. The ability to identify, assess, and control the emotions of oneself or others and of groups, right? So it's not controlling in a bad way, but helping, to the others, right? Controlling your own, keeping yourself in check, knowing what you're feeling and what's going on, being in tune with that. But then also the flip of that, being in tune with what others are feeling. How can you tell, the nonverbals, all of that, what they're saying, their body language, all of those kinds of things, right? And helping, to be able to, deal with situations in the best way, knowing and taking into account, so that you get that best reaction from other people, so that they're not defensive, so that they, trust you, and those kinds of things. The other definition that I have showing here, the ability to identify, use, understand, and manage your own and others' emotions in an effective and positive way. So it really comes down largely to emotions, right? To your feelings, to other people's feelings, and how to, the art of handling those, right, is part of what goes into improving your emotional intelligence. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. So that's what really just the basic defining it would look like. It's different than EQ, than IQ, right? Your emotional aspect, and that can be called EQ or EI, emotional intelligence. So you really, the EQ focuses, as we've already been seeing, right, on more of that being very self-aware, really reflecting on yourself and others and behaviors and attitudes and just how you're feeling, your gut, paying attention to going inside, right? It also has to do with the relationship management. That's the real benefit. If you can get better at be more emotionally intelligent, and you can, we're going to talk about some ways to do that. You can then help more with the relationship management wherever you're working or interacting. It could be personal and professional settings. So really helping with, manage those relationships is just as important as the like what we need to do, when we need to get it done, that kind of thing. So it's really, really important being socially aware and above all, empathetic, right? Being able to put yourselves into the shoes of others and be able to, understand and think, how this is affecting them and really paying attention to that versus your traditional IQ, right? That's much more of your technical know-hows, right? Your expertise areas, that this is actually from a blog that's architecture, Mike the architect, and in his blog, but I just really loved how it pieces it together. So he has more kind of the architect, that architecture, that more knowledge, but it could be knowledge in whatever area, right, that you work in, that you're, dealing in, all of that. Critical thinking skills, excellent, very important, right? IQ is also somewhat your innate, right? You're born with, to some degree, some of your IQ is going to come from that, but there are also things that you can do to improve some of that as well. But so it's really, I just think it's important to differentiate, right? EQ versus IQ. Now, when you look at like a low emotional intelligence versus a high emotional intelligence, right? Obviously, we all want to be on the right side here, right? The high emotional intelligence. And truth be told, there's probably areas that each of you are still on this left side that's listed as low emotional intelligence, right? And that's okay. You can absolutely work on and improve. And like I said, there's many things that you can do to get better. But the first part is really being aware of what does it really mean, right? Emotional intelligence. What does this mean? How can I get better at it? I hear that it's very important in many ways. And in fact, emotional intelligence is very tied as well. A higher emotional intelligence is tied with more success in career. Studies have shown, and I'm actually going to send you in the follow up one of the studies that talks about how it's been. Studies have shown that it's related to higher performance, right? Higher level, like moving up more, career advancement, and higher salary. So all good things, right? Those are all things that, we'd all like to have, right? Each of us would like to have. So it is something that is important. And I think the fact that you're here today really tells me that you're interested in learning more about it and getting better at it. And, maybe, finding out how you can take a test. And we'll talk about that as well on getting, on how emotionally intelligent you are, and then, what you can do to improve from there. So some of the low sides, right, in the top one, right, could be, aggressive versus assertive, right? And there's definitely a difference there. Yeah. Assertive, asking, for, what you need, but in a way that's not an aggressive, like I'll plow over anyone else who's in my way. It's more working within and with, the other people to, make things known and in a positive professional way, all of that. So your low emotional intelligence could also be demanding, right? Versus, ambitious. There's nothing wrong with being ambitious. A lot of times ambitious comes across as people automatically equate it to kind of that over ambitious where you'll just, you'll climb that ladder and you'll just climb over, and whatever, anyone who's on it, it doesn't matter. Your only interest is yourself. Ambition in and of itself is, drive, ambition, wanting to, whether it's make a difference, do those kind of things are good, right? So, you're low again here, egotistical, bossy or confrontational, right? Could be, and the confrontational could be, a result of, when something's said, your emotions, you write in your emotions of defensiveness, right? Come up. And so it can kind of come across as confrontational, or people don't necessarily maybe feel comfortable giving you feedback, constructive feedback, is the intent, right? But sometimes you can take that differently. A low intelligence person might, take that as be more defensive and confrontational, versus, the strong-willed, decisive, and open to, feedback. A couple of the other ones that are on here, I mean, you can look at this as well, right? The easily distracted, it could be very more self-centered, focus more on kind of what you have. Being you're not as good of a listener typically. People who are really good listeners, what are they doing? They're listening to you. What are they or aren't they doing? Any thoughts from you? How do you know someone's listening and giving you their full attention? You can just drop it in the chat box, anyone who wants to contribute to that, because that's a big one with, the higher emotional intelligence, that listening skills, right? Eye contact, absolutely. Eye contact when possible, right? Absolutely. And leaning in, the nodding, you're confirming, you're hearing them, you're listening to what they have to say, right? Exactly. Poor listeners, on the other hand, it's those opposites, right? Bad eye contact, maybe even distracted by their phone or something like that, which is, annoying, but not giving you those signals that, hey, I'm here, I'm listening to what you have to say, and what you have to say is important. So, emotional intelligence, low emotional intelligence can be tied a lot with it's listed as stubborn, right? Very maybe resistant to change, right? So stubborn, as it says here, unresponsive, slow. It's holding on to what they have, right? And not being as open to consider other ideas and to consider. And part of that comes from a fear. Part of that comes from just that, they're not, they don't have that emotional intelligence developed as much, where, they're more open to and working as a team to address things and concerns, and, open to that feedback, all of those things. So, and then also with the low, side here, the rest of the ones that are here, can be very critical, or picky, fussy, hard to please, might be a perfectionist, right? Now, if you go and you take one of these tests, and it comes out that maybe and you need to be honest in the test, obviously, that's the only way you're going to get an honest assessment, right? So some of these words in the low part, I get it, they're not words that any of us would want to associate with ourselves, right? Selfish, bossy. I mean, a lot of these are like, wow, they just bring up emotion right there. It doesn't mean that you have all of these. If you have a lower emotional intelligence, you do a test and it comes out that it's, lower, it doesn't mean that all of these apply to you, but it's good to look at them and just be conscious of, okay, how can I make sure that I'm acting more on the right side here, and moving toward that higher emotional intelligence, right? So being, and the things on this side, right? Some of the rest of them, being patient, right? Patient with others. Maybe somebody's slow and they're taking their time, and they're not, their emotional intelligence is lower currently, right? Being patient with that, not like, prodding them, hurry, you've got to hurry, or giving them, negative feedback, really being patient and helpful, and being there to provide a lending hand, if and when needed, right? Being, again, like I said, that good listener, being, very, just very, I guess the word that I want to use is, it's like a whole centered, right? You're centering on the other person or persons on your team, that type of thing, as well as on yourself. It's not just going just to them and ignoring your own emotions. It's really navigating that, both of those together. So, being very careful and detailed and things like that. So I hope that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about, some of the things that emotionally intelligent folks have. So why is it important? because it basically helps individuals to really communicate better, right? And also reduce their anxiety. So this is, in stress, diffuse conflicts and improve relationships. And isn't that what it's all about? Improving relationships and self-knowledge. Like that's how we're going to work together better. That's how we're going to make the changes that need to be done to go forth and make the organization, agency, if we're working, in the work environment, or ourselves, more effective in our personal and professional relationships, right? All with the goal of helping to effectively overcome life's challenge. I liked this definition, or this, this little, quote there, because it talks about all the different kind of areas. It's so important in many, many areas. And I put this graphic up here so you can see there are different ways. Like I said, this one has like the 4 quadrants here that it shows, emotional balance, social awareness, self-awareness, and then there's mindfulness kind of underneath, all of it. But there are different ways to look at the model as well, and you'll see that a little bit. I want to take a question actually here that I see in the chat box. Is a good follower in the group, does it say high? Do they have high emotional intelligence? I think is what yeah. Is a good follower in the group of high emotional intelligence? Yeah, I would definitely, you'll see when we go through a little bit more here, though. I would say yes, a good follower. If you mean by good follower, somebody, I'm not meaning like that very just totally quiet, I'm gonna go along, I don't say anything, I don't do anything, I just accept the changes like a sheep, just going along with whatever. That wouldn't necessarily be the good kind of follower. But I think a good follower and an emotionally intelligent, one who has more emotional intelligence, is able to follow in and participate in that group process, the decision, the path, much more effectively, right? They're in tune with their own emotions as well as the emotions of the others around them, so that they can come together and really work together. I like this graphic a lot. And it talks about, more of the impacts, right? I mean, increased intelligence among like managers, for example, or really it's in the workplace overall, right? If you have a leader and a workforce that's higher in emotional intelligence, you're going to have, these different items here, right? There's going to be the increased leadership ability, right? The better you are at emotional intelligence, the better leader you can be. So that's definitely important. The team performance, if we bring emotional intelligence to the workplace, your team can become more productive and more fun and more just empathetic, right? And that's a good thing, understanding and appreciating each other and the challenges that we're dealing with as well. So it also directly impacts decision making. So improved decision making. If you have people and your leader who is an emotionally intelligent person, right, and they bring that to the table, that's going to help them make better decisions, incorporating your knowing and looking at and observing and getting your feedback and your impressions, and doing it as a group, making decisions together. Many of the decisions are made as a group, not just the top down approach. So absolutely. Decreased occupational stress. This is a really good one, because I think when people don't feel they're heard, or they don't feel they feel defensive, right, about someone's going to either attack them, or they need to always look like everything's perfect. But it just, that can be a stressful environment where you just to work in, right? If nobody is really kind of reaching out and caring and being open and having that like conversation and just taking different views into account, and the emotions that are there, looking at what's happening, what are we feeling, let's step back, let's look at this and proceed accordingly. Like that just makes a world of difference, right? And who doesn't want I don't think any of us want an occupational environment that's stressful, right? We always want those more, the team spirit ones. I know my favorite ones have certainly been that. Reduce staff turnover. Absolutely. There's studies have shown too with the impact on, if you have a leader that has a higher EQ or EI, right? The turnover in the organization is less, for obvious reasons, right? People feel heard. People feel valued and met where they are. And if that person, if that leader can really take people's feelings and really understand their feelings and how they're feeling and empathize and all of those skills that are part of it, they can definitely, it leads to increased job satisfaction, right? Which results in reduced turnover. People don't want to leave an organization when they're in a really great environment. They feel like, wow, I love my team. And in fact, there are times where people hesitate to leave, or they delay leaving, maybe even after they should. Like maybe they are wanting to move up in some area and they've pretty much tapped their potential in their company, in their organization, but they absolutely love the work environment, the feel, the mission, all of that. They might decide to stay there longer, and there's nothing wrong with that either. That is a personal choice, but my point is, it really does reduce the staff turnover as well. And then just overall increased personal well-being, right? And that's what emotional intelligence is all about. It's that, mindfulness, right, of our own bodies, of our own emotions, what we're feeling, where we're feeling it, and taking time to actually work on those kinds of things. More mindfulness and ways to bring in more mindfulness, into your life. And I'm going to want to get a little bit of your input on that as well, on how you can do that. How do folks do like mindfulness? Do any of you practice mindfulness currently? And if so, maybe share a little bit. You're welcome to even take yourself off of mute. I'm allowing that for a smaller group. So you're welcome to let me know. Or you can drop it in the chat box. What kinds of mindfulness practices do you incorporate, if any? And if none, then I would highly encourage you to incorporate some of those. Okay. Yeah. So Guillermo's saying, yeah, number 1 and 3, and we'll talk, more about this graphic. Yeah, absolutely. But mindfulness can be, yep, that, yeah, it can definitely account for, it can include that self-awareness and the emotions, how I'm feeling it, right. I sometimes have my daughter do, the belly breathing, right, where if she's feeling an emotion, right, and there's emotions are high, just taking a step back and really taking several of those belly breaths, right, where you just, breathe really deeply, through your nose, and then, hold it for a few seconds and then release, and just keep it. And it really, I've noticed that it helps her to maintain more of that calmness, or bring that calmness when she gets sometimes a little worked up. She's an 8-year-old. So that happens. So great. Mindfulness, Heather is sharing, mindfulness to me means being sensitive to the other. That's a really good point. Heather, do you want to expand on that at all? You're welcome to unmute yourself. That's allowed. To my interlocutor. I can't, no problem. That's just fine. You've put extra info in the chat box. That's fine. Anyone else want to add to that? How do you kind of maintain or find mindfulness? How do you practice mindfulness in your own life, if you do? All right. Let's see here. Okay, well, let's go through this. And if you have some more, please dump them in the chat box and I'll take them afterwards. That's just fine. So these are just some questions that I came across. I like this graphic a lot on, everyone wants to increase their emotional intelligence, right? So how do we do that? And that's the real key, right? How do we double our emotional intelligence, for example? This is 5 questions to do that. So number 1, in the self-awareness, what specific emotion am I feeling right now? Do those self-checks frequently. And especially when something comes up where you're like, ooh, something hits you and it's like you're either there's fear or there's, concern, there's anger, really getting into what is that specific emotion I'm feeling right now? What's behind this? Yep, absolutely. And then empathy, of course, right? Thinking about the other, right? What emotion is the other people feeling right now? So trying to keep that in mind as well. And I'll give you an example really quickly here from my own life. I live in Maryland, and I'm in a county where my daughter is in a public public charter school, and it's a specialty program. And there was recently an issue with we were possibly going to be literally ripped out of our facility where we've been for almost 2 decades. And we've really made it our own and all of that, and put into this smaller school that would not be significantly, it would not be large enough. There were like all these things, right? But the other side of the fence were many of my dear friends in another city, where they, if we would have been kicked out of our space, it would have provided them to have a large enough, what they call swing space. And it means when kids are going, they have to have an alternative facility while their school is getting like renovated or built all new. So this particular community is getting an entire new, it's awesome. I'm so happy for them. They're getting a new middle school complete after 2 years. So, but for them, if we stay where we are, only half of their school can fit in to share. We're a swing space, so we always welcome different schools, and that's just part of what the reality is. But half of them would be there and half are somewhere else. And so I had to, it's really hard for me because, I'm passionate about my daughter's school, and this other would not have allowed Montessori methods. So I had all of this emotion and all of this, this logic too, like this doesn't make sense. Da, 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 da. But I had to really step back and like put myself in the shoes of the other community to say, well, sure, if I were in that community, of course I would have preferred to have everyone together, because thinking about my child being in a school where they're split up between two campuses, that, that's hard for 2 years, all of that. So having to kind of come back and remind myself and try to, even that out is just one example, right, of that empathy, thinking about what others, are feeling. The third one, the self-regulation, really one question might be, how can I control my emotions or my reactions right now in this moment? Because as we all know, it doesn't always help to wear your emotions on your sleeve, right? But at the same time, you want to be in touch with them and be able to keep them in check. And like, okay, it doesn't just mean suppress, but it's more, how can I, control this in response to like what we're dealing with, keep it in that, okay, this is what I'm feeling, and I honor and acknowledge that. And I'm not going to let myself just get more, worked up and, whatever, so that because when I get that way, I'm not going to be able to be effective, and I'm going to be defensive, and I'm going to be not able to collaborate. So that's a good question for helping to improve your emotional intelligence. Number 4, the social skills. So how can I show genuine interest in this person right now? That's that building empathy and building social, your social relationships, right? And your business relationships, really getting at that more, personal level, like that being genuinely interested in other people. I honestly think return Peace Corps volunteers, I think in general, you tend to be more emotionally intelligent as a whole. I don't have studies to back that up, but you definitely have some of these skills, like the social skills, right? You did this in country. You went to a completely foreign country and, forged these relationships, and really, strong relationships to get things done. So you've got a lot of what it is right now. And, we all can improve. So I'm glad everyone's here. And then lastly, with the motivation aspect, how, or that quadrant, how am I interpreting this specific task? Like, is this an easy task to do, or do I need to back up and get clarification? And again, motivation is one of the ones, I think that RPCVs tend to be very motivated people. We're in it to help people. We're in it to make a difference. And I truly think that's one that a lot of times RPCVs do have already. But some other ways in terms of, improving your emotional intelligence, right? So like I said, recognizing and naming your emotions, which really goes with that number 1 graphic that we're showing here. And then becoming more mindful, right, of your reactions, and that empathetic, that's again, that was in this as well. Taking time to learn about, and I didn't really talk about the time as much, but with the social and like in connecting with people, take time to learn about others, and also yourself, and your own self-awareness, about your emotions, and others. So, and then that last one, asking for feedback, that's a really key one. And I know that's hard to do sometimes, especially if you are feeling defensive, or you're oftentimes, it's hard to ask for feedback. But if you try to put yourself into that mentality of, look, I am asking for constructive feedback, and even when you don't ask for that constructive feedback and you get feedback, right, formalized in a performance assessment or whatever, try not to take it like personally, like, oh, this is a reflection of your personal, being and the quality of person you are. Try to keep it in that this is constructive feedback, and how can I react to this best? Maybe first by thanking them. If you want to build that openness, thank you for that feedback. I really appreciate getting that. I'd love a little more clarification on what specifically you mean by XYZ, so that I can process this and make sure to take actions to improve, or whatever. So you're basically saying, I want to hear what you have to say, and you may not understand all of it, so you can ask for that in a very I think professional way, if that makes sense. Okay. So reactions can shame, blame, or claim. I like it, Simona. And yes, not your quote. I don't remember who that is, but I've seen that. That's great. Awesome. And that is really important. You want the reaction that's going to be, more of that, claim, where they're going to feel, comfortable with it, and you're going to feel comfortable with it. Great. So your ways to increase emotional intelligence, again, as I said, I feel like I'm really beating this in here, but, being mindful, right? As you become more empathetic, right? Taking that time, I just had this on this one as well, and asking for feedback. So that's that. We've done this. Let's go on. So basically what I want to do now is just take some time to take some questions from people, and some comments, or reactions, things like that. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box, or you can unmute, and certainly just ask your question. That's fine too. We'll start with that. And if folks do want to make comments, maybe you have some additional insight on emotional intelligence that you want to share, or that you've read about, please share that as well. That would be great. As I said, I'd like this to be a learning environment where we're all learning from each other and such. All right. Anything else, folks? Is there anything that we went through that just didn't really make sense, or you had follow-up questions on? Now, I did promise you that I was going to give you the testing. I'm going to be sending the what I send after every webinar, and it has the resources that we, that are used for this presentation, or that are helpful for additional information. One of those resources is going to be a website where you could actually there's 3 different ones listed. There's 3 different options, and 2 of them are free. And the free options, it'll give you a basic report, and then it will, if you want the expanded, you pay something for that. But I think the basic even helps you get an idea of how you are, whether you are a good, whether you have higher emotional intelligence, whether you score higher or lower. And I definitely, once you get the results, you can certainly do more research online on how can I build my emotional intelligence, how can I improve in, and you'll find many different free resources. I'm always one that tries to promote the free resources over the paid, because I know that many times, especially when you're first transitioning back, for those of you who are from service and such, money's tight. So but there are some very good ones out there. Let's see. Guillermo says, something to share. I walked away from a job offer because of the manager's lack of emotional intelligence. Wow. It would not be a good fit for me, as the manager was not empathetic and reacted emotionally to my simple job inquiry questions. Wow, that's really good that you did walk away from that. It sounds like this person this would-be boss was definitely not, like, if they got defensive to your basic questions, that's not a good sign. So kudos to you for knowing and walking away. And I think many of us have had the situation where we've gone to an interview, And we come away from it and it's like, I would not take this job if they offered it to me on a like, no way. What is that really about? What that usually is about is exactly what you're saying, right? There's some kind of indication that the team is not a strong team, that it's, there's not a high EQ. You might not have put that label on it before, among the leader, that type of thing, or it's not a good culture. And it's really important to honor and acknowledge culture and the importance of finding a culture that you feel like you fit in, a supportive team, all of that. And sometimes it's hard to know all of that up front, but boy, when you get those red flags right up front where you're like, wow, that sounds like a very good decision to have walked away, Guillermo. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Prince has shared in the chat box, mindfulness is being very careful before taking a decision that affects others. Ooh, I like that. That's great. The mindfulness, really, taking it in, thinking about it, the decision and the impact on others before just plowing ahead with whatever, idea you have or whatever solution you've come up with. That's so much more, it's so much better to be mindful and to have a manager, right? And to have leadership that's mindful of that. Now, by the way, emotional intelligence is something that it's been around for a long time, right? The concept. And there's the book by the same name, Emotional Intelligence, by, is it John? Oh, what's his last name? Gorham. Starts with the G. Danielle, maybe you can get that. I'm just blanking on his name, but he was really kind of one of the leaders in this field of emotional intelligence, right? And it's been around for a very long time, and it's something that people have tweaked. As I was saying earlier, some will have the 5 areas, some will have 4. So people have kind of tweaked to make it their own. But let's see, we have another comment here in the chat box. All right, and I might stop sharing here because we are at the end here. And Goldman, thank you. Yes, Goldman, Simona, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's yep. John Goldman, I think it is, and it's emotional intelligence, and it's really good. There's some really good work in there. So other questions, let's see if there's anything coming in. I was interested in this session to hear tips and tricks from fellow RPCVs who feel like they're emotionally intelligent, but maybe are struggling with all the challenges that Americans throw at us. America throws at us every day. Isn't that true? Oh my goodness. BLM, elections, spewed hate. It's tough. I agree. And Stephen, I open that up to the rest of the audience. If you have some insight, he's really looking for your tips and tricks, to kind of, in spite of the negative, right, trying to maintain that kind of more positive. Part of it is a positive attitude too, right? Not a Pollyanna unrealistic, but a positive attitude, even in the face of challenge, right? You may be going through really tough times, and our country is going through clearly really tough times in so many ways, and yet you can maintain that positive attitude, in light of the challenge, and moving forward, and just believing in, the ability to make a difference, create a difference, move toward improvement, that kind of thing as well. So that's great. Wonderful. Danielle, yes. Angelique says to Stephen, I have a coworker that complained that these customers we were working with were rude. But what I observed is she was too quick to interrupt and not listen and go straight to telling them what to do. Ooh, yeah, that doesn't sound good. I didn't want to be critical, but I suggested maybe starting with some small talk on something we all have in common, build a bit of rapport before getting right to business. I think that's a great suggestion, Angelique. Absolutely, because we are all humans, right? Fundamentally, we are humans. And if we can connect on that human to human level, and more in the niceties, even the like, hey, where are you coming from? Oh, wow, the weather's so great today. I got out for a whatever, like just connecting on that kind of thing instead of diving straight into sometimes difficult tasks. I think that can make a world of difference. Great. Thanks, Angelique. That's wonderful. Janice has some other insight. Janice, would you like to share that? You can go off mute, or I can read it for you. It's up to you. I will take that as I will read it for you. Visualizing that lighthouse in a Jean Guichard photo is kind of reassuring. Oh, yeah, you know what? I'm not sure which one am I don't know if I've seen that. Maybe you can dump it in the chat box what we're talking about there. There's is it the lighthouse that's like in the long distance, the like teeny tiny, like keep your eye on that. We'll get to it. Like where it's kind of, I'm not sure if that's it or not, but thank you for sharing, and people can look that up. Awesome. And great. Wonderful. Other thoughts here. Guillermo. Oh, you shared that one. We did. Great. Let's get down here. Anything else? Oh, you're sharing the image. Let's see. Let me just look that up too. Oh my, yeah. Wow. Yeah, that I was thinking it was the small one in the distance where it's like really bleak, but yeah, wow. That is quite a I guess I can share my screen here again if that's funny. Let me see here. Let me share it real quick so people can see. It's a beautiful, and also wow. There we go. So everyone can see that. Wow, wow, wow. Great. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing there. Any other thoughts? Any other, thanks again, Danielle, for your help. Take care. Janice, and if you're stuck working with such people, work toward transferring to an environment where emotional intelligence is embraced. That's a really good suggestion. And, I get also, Janice, I totally agree with that. And I totally get that sometimes in different environments like we are in today, maybe there's oftentimes it's not as easy as you might think to just, oh, I'm just going to go get another job. That can be more difficult, right? So I think that, that I'm just acknowledging that as well. I get that that's difficult also. So what else do we have here for folks? Any other comments that you have? And again, I welcome you to take yourself off mute if you'd like to just say a comment. We're right at the top of the hour anyway. So if there aren't any other final comments, I would just like to thank all of you for taking the time to be with me here today and to chat on this very important subject. And I really hope that you will take advantage of and take some of the, EI tests just to see kind of how you are. And again, as I say, don't put the right answer, quote unquote. I mean, I know we all know when we're doing tests, like what you want to be or what you wish you were. You want to answer that truly how you are at that gut level, right? However it first hits you. Don't think about it too much. Just, answer it in that light. And that's going to give you the best frame of mind for where you can improve and to help you in that regard. Okay. So great. So thank you everyone for being here today.